This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 11:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast. You are on Ask a Rabbi.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, sporting our new gift from the health department of black masks.
Ooh, okay.
Don't they look classy? And yes, I do take it off to talk because it is harder to talk through the mask. And since we also do video, and I drink.
I wasn't going to get that personal.
Well, folks, I drink Starbucks.
Starbucks.
Good old
Yeah,
Starbucks.
let's qualify this, yes.
Yes.
Well, speaking of your mask, we got a notification from Florida, Southwest College.
Yeah.
And they mentioned to me that I had to broadcast the games with
a mask.
on.
Yeah.
At all times. I cannot be unmasked at all. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's serious stuff.
It is serious stuff. And just for the record, Greg.
Whoa! Holy smokes,
Yeah.
that's for us?
That's for you.
Oh, cool.
So,
yeah.
Thank you, health department.
Yes.
This is where I was heading last Friday, was to pick up a whole nother case of those.
Wow.
So we are working at discharging them, giving them out where they can help. Whoops, sorry about that.
That's great.
Yeah. So,
Well, I'll say one thing. I think the health departments all over have done a good job. But St. Lucie County Health Department has done a real good job, I think.
they have.
Tried. I mean, nobody knows what's, really happening out there. We've never been there before,
So, yeah.
So how is the world at IRSC?
The world at IRSC is wonderful. My students are doing well. And, let's see if I can get this.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Technology
the joy.
again.
Yeah. So, my students are doing well. I've got my classes going on, and I'm getting a charge out of people some of the questions you get, the class is Intro to Philosophy, rather, and the question from one of the students was, how do I write a philosophical argument? and my question always first back for something like that is, have you read the textbook? Because we're on chapter 2. Yeah.
Textbook.
Yeah, the textbook. Imagine.
Why
that.
in the world would you
I
read
want
a
to read
textbook?
a textbook? Yeah, when I can ask the question.
You read chapter 1.
It's. And I've chuckled about that a little bit. I was actually talking about that with a colleague. And, these are online courses. And, of course, in class you say things like that in chapter 1, blah, blah, right? And so they get that. And I do post videos and recordings and things like that in the class. But one of the things that I actually put in for each chapter is read chapter X. So in the folder for chapter 1, it says read chapter 1.
It seems pretty obvious there.
You would think that if the folder said chapter 1, that you would look in chapter 1 of the textbook. But we have so spoon-fed our youth that they are not capable of that jump without instruction.
Wait a minute. Back up. What?
Let me say, not that they're not capable, that some of them are challenged. Let me rephrase this carefully. Okay, I'm not going to say that none of them are capable, because clearly most of the class is doing it. Either that or they're really working hard at faking it. And if they're Googling it and looking it up, they're spending more time and effort than if they opened the book and read it. Which, that to me is always the interesting thing. The assumption that and textbooks can get wordy.
Oh, you bet.
They can big time get wordy. There are textbooks that I don't enjoy reading because they, say it 15 times.
See, that question brings to mind some of the stunts I used to pull in class. Being very sarcastic. Gee, what a surprise, right?
You?
Me? Oh, my. I actually, through this station, received an email from an old college professor who just said, wow, I never would have thought you would have made it this long.
Whoa.
And I was laughing. I said, yeah, that's probably true. Yep.
We do grow up, but
No. Some grow up.
Some grow up more than others.
I am living
some
proof.
some physically grow up, others
not really.
Okay, so all kidding aside, there is a tendency to want to oversimplify everything and just, for example, I was thinking back to when I was a student versus now. I got a couple of students who said, hey, I'm going to be traveling this weekend. Can I have an extension on the due date? And I'm like, in the old days, I would have worked ahead, gotten the assignment in, and then been free to travel.
Yeah, but that's you.
Yeah, I know.
I never would have done that. Never.
It's and I did put on my Facebook wall some years ago a meme that went around that said, "Oh, if there was only one more day for this assignment, I'd have one more day to party."
Yeah, got that.
And we're so deadline keyed that we don't go from where we are to see what work needs to be done within a given amount of time. We go to the deadline and work backwards what we think it's going to take us to do it. And then when we run into challenges, we are very upset. And, it's kind of, there are always going to be challenges, right? So I will share with everyone, there were a number of things that I was working on my computer last night, and I left some windows open and some documents open that I was working on. And I closed out some videos. I had taken some images and positioned them in a video that I'm making. I'm making a number of videos for the congregation right now for the
that's
High
cool.
Holy Days.
Wow.
Yeah, Camtasia and I are becoming really good friends.
Okay.
And
okay.
Anyway, and
gosh, you're a Hollywood producer. Huh?
I'm not anywhere near that good. I did take.
But you're trying.
I'm trying. In that Tucson station that when neither one of us can remember the. Lisa, what's the name of the station? She was the manager, and I apologize. I did PSAs for them. I did all kinds of things. We actually did take a class in production and editing that they offered. That was incredible. They took, and I also did one on animation, on cartooning and things like that. Very, very interesting stuff that's done now on software. And it's just amazing what can be done. And, here's the shout out to Camtasia. That's what I ended up buying. And it is a good piece of editing software.
I think about what you're talking about now. And I remember, this is back in the 70s, doing a story on Where Are They Now? And it was one of the heads of animation at Disney, who happened to be from San Diego, went to San Diego State, and the whole thing, But, you think about all these hand-drawn cartoons, and now you're talking about this animation program. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the stuff that it does. There's one. We were gifted a package of videos to incorporate into the service, which we're doing. But one of them, and I love Peter Yarrow. He's an incredible guy, but he's talking like this soft into the mic. And
this is the Peter Yarrow?
The Peter Yarrow. And it's an incredible
Peter, Paul,
video.
and Mary.
Peter, Paul, and Mary. Peter,
Whoa.
Paul, and Mary
Whoa.
Yarrow.
Okay.
And the song, he sang it in the 90s, and When Day Is Done is the song. But he talks a prelude into it. Take my son, take my hand.
Uh-huh.
They was very well known for it. And it's... for me, it's an extremely powerful video for a different reason than most people might think. And that, I'll get to that in a minute, but he starts out, and he's talking very softly about different times when he's played it, different situations where he's used it, and he's used it at celebrations of life and things like that. So he's used it for the end of times for people, and he also uses it just as a, to tell you that tomorrow is part of it. And he goes on to explain all of these meanings and things. And then he ends with a concert. And the concert's pretty powerful because of who's in it. And interestingly, aside from knowing a couple of people in the video, was who they were. And it was a surprise to me the first time I saw it. I mean, I just did one of those. I shouldn't have been surprised because I know that those folks hang together, that they know each other, that they're friends, and they live in the same area. But it's still always a surprise when you know somebody and, they're in a video.
Sure.
And I've had that experience several times this season, both with videos that friends of mine have posted and that have other friends in the pictures and things like that. So it's fun to see your friends in things like that, and it really is. So yeah. Anyway, but he's talking so softly, and when we stream it, we did a test stream on it, and it doesn't come through loud enough. Okay, people have the volumes on their devices turned all the way up, and they're still struggling to hear, and so Camtasia. Camtasia boosted the audio. Thank you.
There you go.
You got it. And at the end of it's loud because it's his concert. So I did what you guys do in the back so often, which is move that part up. And I still have to do it one more time. I didn't get it quite loud enough, but I got it a lot louder than it was. So
that's awesome.
It was really, really low. So yeah,
Peter Yarrow.
Wow. Peter Yarrow. So that's one of the folks that we're going to have at our High Holy Day service.
Wow.
People will get to see that video, and I know that that'll be very, very powerful. And it's a powerful message, right? Things will be better when day is done. And he explains that part of that is that no matter what happens, we need to pick up in the morning and keep moving on. We're part of the activity of life so long as we are breathing. And, that we owe it to the people that we've lost to live our lives fully. So I'm going to flip somewhere else. Okay, there's something called the dutiful mourner. And this is a fallacy that people fall into. That if I loved this person, I won't be able to live without them. And that is setting yourself up for a real disaster that doesn't need to happen, shouldn't happen. And if you fall into that category, and I think that that's an easy trap for some people to fall into based on some of the grief work that I've done. And if the way that the logic works on that is that, I loved this person. If I love them, then I must think about them all the time. If they've died, then I must mourn them all the time. And, put myself into this depression and this unproductive, unhappy life. And that's a fallacy. That isn't the way that you demonstrate love. The way that you demonstrate love is to do things that are meaningful in their memory. Right, to take their energy and the things that mattered to them, that mattered to you, the things that you shared, and move those things forward.
Yeah, I mean, I've joked joke with Carol that, we've been together, 47 years, 48 if you count the dating year. And I don't know what I'd do without her,
Yeah.
But that is interesting about
right.
the mourning.
But, and that's actually a discussion that I would invite couples to have is, how would you like me to honor you if I survive your death?
Wow.
Okay. And here's what I would ask you to do
heavy.
if you, I'm not saying it's light.
Yeah, no,
it's a serious discussion. Judaism actually has a practice called an ethical will. It's called an eitzah. An ethical will. And what that is that's telling your children, your grandchildren, your partners, your anybody significant in your life, what's important to you, maybe why, and how you would love it if people could honor you this way or that way. Give them some choices, because it's got to be something that resonates with them. You can't control it down the road. You can't control others. Right? It's the fallacy of control is probably the biggest cause of unhappiness and dissatisfaction in the world, is people thinking they can control things. Because the reality is, when you cut the umbilical cord, control is done.
Ooh, that's intriguing. Yeah,
right.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you weren't the one attached umbilically to that person, then you have less control than even its mother.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's intriguing. Yeah.
Right. So, and as many a mother will tell you, even in the womb, the kid doesn't listen. The kid does what the kid's going to do.
Kid's going to kick no matter what.
The kid's going to kick, and at the worst possible time and in the worst possible way. And that's just life.
Usually in a restaurant.
Well, the most embarrassing place they possibly can.
Yes. No, that's so true. That is, wow. That's really true.
It's as if they have radar inside that womb and say, I got it. But no, they're not having that wicked a thought. It's just that you don't pay attention to it when it's not embarrassing.
Of course, then you take a terrible two into a restaurant, and they'll do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Only there you can't contain them within your body.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Yeah, I remember those days a long time ago, but I remember them.
So getting back to it, so you are Jewishly expected to leave an ethical will for people. And I have conducted classes teaching people how to write them, how to craft them. But it's important to do. It's important to have those discussions.
Wow.
All right.
That's amazing.
And it's not an easy discussion, and it's not one to be done frivolously. It's one to be done with seriousness. And that's part of the reason for sitting back, reflecting, and writing it down. What matters to you? Why do you choose to vote whichever way you choose to vote in this election? Right? What were you thinking? Was it one issue? Was it 10 issues? Was it morality? Was it honesty? Was it, whatever? I don't know. Whatever the issues were that mattered to you.
Can't be honesty. It's politics. Oh, I'm sorry.
Never mind. We're not going there. I do. That's interesting, right? Because in my
I'm sorry.
In my ethics class, one of the more interesting papers to me is the politician's paper that students have to write. They have to write a paper on politicians, and they have to pick a Democrat and a Republican, in a campaign. And then they have to analyze 3 or more fallacies from that politician.
That's pretty easy.
And the final test, the final rubric on the grading is I need to not be able to tell if you're a Democrat or a Republican writing this paper. Okay, so in other words, I'm not going to just get, a bunch of garbage that's political rhetoric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. They're really they have to go through and they have to tell me what the fallacies are, and clearly, many politicians fall back on ad hominems. And it's going to be an interesting semester this semester for my ethics class, though, because one of my students already posted in a discussion item was that, quote unquote, I use ad hominems and I never realized it was a fallacy. But that student was able to look back and saw when they used it, what caused them to go there. And gee, imagine that. It's usually done when there isn't a good argument to put forth. Right? That's when people will fall back on fallacies, when there isn't a good logical argument to refute the statements, the arguments of your interlocutor, right? The person with whom you're discussing. And yes, I'm using some of these fancy terms. Argument philosophically is a set of premises that make a statement that hopefully leads to a conclusion, if it's valid, if the logic is valid. And we use invalid logic all the time. We're subjected to it through politicians. We're subjected to it through advertising. One of the fun things in the creative and critical thinking class, one of my assignments is to take a Disney movie and to analyze the fallacies in the movie that are taught. And you'd be surprised how many fallacies the characters give you. And the problem with that, and the reason that I do the paper, is, as a religious teacher, I can't tell you how many times I've been hit by, well, in Lion King it says blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, that's Hollywood, and they're changing things around to make it what they want, the story they want to tell. They're shifting it. It's not what Scripture says. It's not the real story. Like in Hercules, right? The story of Hercules, that is definitely sugar-coated. For anybody who knows Greek mythology, Hercules' father, Zeus, is running around having affairs with non-god women, with mortals. And Hercules' mother is one of those. And Zeus is far from reputable about this. And Hera is his wife. And he's cheating on her. And that's part of what sets up the dynamic between Hercules and Hera.
I never saw that in the movie.
No, it's not in the movie. In the movie, his parents have a loving relationship, and Hades is made to be the character who's out to get him. And of course we have the delightful character of Mega that's not in any in any part of the story of Hercules, but she's a great character and I adore her. I love a sassy princess, and there aren't too many of those. But so if you look at the Disney stuff, right? Disney changes it for a number of reasons. One, to make it something that they can market to kids. Right, and if and
everything is marketed to children.
Everything is marketed to children because they're so wonderfully impressionable, and we don't protect them enough. And that's a parental thing. Parents need to get involved. Parents need to watch what the kids are watching, and see what's going on. But anyway, so my students, whom I do call my kids, even if they're senior students, and I love those too, they're still my kids. And so, they get to do homework of watching a Disney movie of their choice and then discussing a number of fallacies from them and how they would change it and what they would do to get rid of the fallacy. It's a fun exercise. And the point of the exercise, why do I do a Disney movie? Well, it's kind of cool to be able to say to your parents, hey, I got to watch Mulan. It's my homework.
Yeah.
All right, so it gives the kid a little bit of fun. And it's a change. It's not just a dry article that somebody's posted, that you're going to Google. And you probably are not going to find it real easy to. You're going to find lots of YouTubes out there that give you clips and examples. So that's going to make it, if you don't really want to watch the movie, you don't have to. But my students, you didn't hear that. But the point is, if you're analyzing the fallacies, then that will help. Right.
That's interesting.
It's worthwhile watching it, right? And you see stereotypes in there, like in The Little Mermaid, when the the evil whatever she is says to the Little Mermaid, you have to give up your voice. Right? Women don't need it.
Oh, God.
Right. So, you see the stereotyping going on.
Oh, yeah.
And, and even if you go back and you look at Snow White, what does Snow White do? Snow White sews, she bakes pies, she house cleans. She's this perfect little 1950s little girl.
Joan Cleaver.
And even more so, right, because she's this little girl woman. Mm-hmm. She looks like she's 5 years old. And, that gets in that whole thing of a really dark side of relationships and treatment of women, of babifying them. Right? So, we take little children and we make them up with fancy eyes in the beauty pageants. And we make them look like little sex bombs.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But we want to keep them as 5 to 10 years old because then they're more easily manipulated. All right.
This is one hell of a class. Oh, my goodness.
Well, but some of this is fallacies in it.
Yeah,
and it's stereotyping, and it's discrimination, and it's all of those things. And all of those work into their fallacies. People are entitled to be treated, as Kant would say, people are entitled to be treated as an end, not as a means.
Okay, some of your past students, what were their reactions when they analyzed this stuff?
Oh, they were great. Generally, by the time the Disney paper is one of the last papers that they do in the class.
But they really caught on?
They get onto it. And one of the things, interestingly, that we stress in the class is treat others kindly, because they haven't taken this class. And they don't know that they're talking in fallacies. So don't scream at your loved one, you're using a bandwagon fallacy on me. Don't do that. Gently say, something, I think that maybe blah, blah, blah. Keep your pronouns to yourself, as I like to say. Right?
Yeah.
And don't you this, you that. Because nobody wants to hear that. And nobody's going to listen to it. When people are open to hearing something, they're going to ask for that information. Right? So those are all things to be aware of. And the students are pretty savvy by the end of the class. It's an excellent class. My hat's off to Dr. Cohen for crafting that class the way that he did. And his textbook is short, sweet, and online. So it's wonderful for the students.
That's cool. That's great.
And I also supplement it with another book that's out there, and that's available free. I try to get as many free things for my kids as I can for my students. And that's the Book of Bad Arguments that there's a link in the class to. And that's it's a little thin book of 40 pages. Half of them are pictures. And it just illustrates a number of different fallacies. There's hundreds of fallacies out there, and we use them all the time. And we get ourselves in trouble with them. We get ourselves on endless looping behaviors that are just destructive instead of constructive. And that's sad. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to tie that all in. We're in the month of Elul, and I did not bring the shofar again.
Oh, that was cool.
It's sitting on my counter, and But I will, before we're done here, maybe next week if the stars align.
That'd be cool.
I'll try to sit it out on my purse. If you tune in to my Torah Moments every day at 1:15-ish Eastern Time on Facebook Live, then you'll hear it.
I saw one the other day, and you had it.
Yeah. I've been blowing it a few times so people can hear it. And that I particularly love the shofar that I use for that, because I use the little one. And that was my father's of blessed memory. So that shofar is older than I am. It really did see the
the dinosaurs going through Ohio.
Yeah. But so we have a host of emotions, and many of them are not constructive. Right? Anger is not constructive. Depression is not constructive. Anxiety is not constructive. Those are all destructive emotions.
And there's so many people with anxiety and depression now.
Oh, yeah. Well,
because of everything we're
everything that's going on is a contributor, but it is not the defining piece. All right, that's the piece. Now, some people absolutely need to see a therapist, a licensed counselor, somebody like that to help them if their anxiety or their depression is significant. And those folks are available online. So you can connect to them, without having to go somewhere. So you can do that. But we are the ones, even with those emotions, who choose to respond that way. Now, let me do a caveat. If you've got a chemical imbalance that needs a doctor to balance it, that's a sidebar. But for the average person, okay, not for somebody who doesn't have a chemical imbalance, then you choose over and over and over again to respond to stimulus in a given way, right? So people who are typically angry respond with anger. People who are typically fearful respond with fear. People who are typically depressed respond depressively. Right. So you're going to respond in the way that you teach yourself and are taught by your parents. There's that old age, mirror, mirror on the wall, I am my parents after all. You do learn to respond to things the way that your parents modeled for you. Not what they said to do, but the way that they modeled. Right, which is why, if a parent is puffing on a cigarette and says don't smoke, the kid is likely to smoke. Right? And I'll caution that by saying both of my parents smoked until toward the ends of their lives. My mother actually quit smoking, I think, 1 or 2 years before my dad did, and that was an ongoing battle between the two of them. And I was the one who pushed both of them to stop smoking. And then my dad died. My dad died when I was young. And ever since my dad died, my mother did not smoke. So I'll give her a lot of credit for that, because that was many years that she lived past him.
I'm amazed that I never took that up. Both my parents smoked. Actually, my father died of emphysema back in 1980 on his birthday, of all things. Yeah. It's a tough habit to break.
It is, and I actually did some volunteering back in the day in Philadelphia at Einstein and Moss, working in the emphysema unit. So yeah, and that had a lot to do with why I became an advocate of no smoking. I saw the people who had the emphysema. I volunteered in and around them all the time. And that isn't something I wanted my parents to experience. And,
we have been so lucky here at the stations here in PSL and STU to have this pediatrician who put together the Quit Doc Foundation of Martin County. And gosh, they've been a sports sponsor now for well over 10 years. But he was a pediatrician who started this anti-smoking campaign in schools. And it is now going quite well. I think he's in 16 or 17 counties in the state of Florida now. And it's a great message. But now he's taken that a step further, which you're going to hear beginning tonight, and that is vaping, which is
that's the next step.
Oh, brother.
Yeah.
It's like they never stop. It's like the companies never stop. They always seem to manage to try and find something.
Well, they're trying to stay in business. The fact that it's harmful is, and so people say to me things like, why do people do bad things? They don't set out to do bad things per se. They don't sit there and go, how can we hurt people and make money doing it? That's not the question that they ask. Right? What they ask is, how do I make money? What's the easiest way to make money? because part of their driving principle is this idea that money is some marker of success. And, so they want to, they want to get investors, so they want to be able to offer great returns, etc. And, that's the question they're asking, and they're disregarding the other questions. Right? They're not looking at it, and maybe they don't have the same set of moral issues.
Which gets you back to your ethics again.
Right, which gets you back to ethics. In ethics, we corporate ethics, right? We know that 1 out of 9 corporations is going to commit actionable fraud.
Wow, that's high.
It's very, very high because unfortunately, it's financially very tempting, right? And companies, unfortunately, I know that on Ask a Lawyer, Stewart's talked about it a couple of times in terms of punitive damages, but corporations make dollar and cents decisions not based on the morals of it, but which one's going to cost them the most, which one's going to be the most detrimental for the shareholders. And when you unpin ethics and morality from those decisions, then you can really get far off the rail. And, it's not that they're trying to hurt people, it's that they don't care. Those questions are not on the table for them. Right? The question is, like in
the Enrons of the world.
The Enrons of the world, and it's, is the litigation going to cost more than the fix? And you'll hear arguments like people are going to get hurt anyway. The question is how many of them are going to sue us? And it's like, I would have trouble sleeping at night.
Yeah. How do you look at yourself in the mirror?
But, that's because I've got this different moral underpinning. They're not looking at the morals of the issue. They're not looking at themselves as being personally responsible for those actions. They're divorcing themselves from their actions. And if you think about it, you go, how can people do that? People do that all the time, right? People, let's look at people who get angry. If I scream and yell at you, I want to get you to do what I want you to do, and I'm willing to hurt you and myself to get you to do it. That's the piece they really don't think about, right? Because that anger, I'm chuckling only because one of my good friends often says when you point a finger at somebody, and I'll use the hand up as a signal, right? When you point at somebody, you're pointing 3 fingers back at yourself.
I like that.
Right?
That's great.
Yeah, so if you're pointing at somebody, 3 of those fingers in your hand are coming back at you. And, so in an argument with somebody, in a discussion, a heated discussion, I said that to somebody. I said, if you're pointing fingers at somebody, 3 are pointing back at you. And he said, I don't care how many fingers you point at me. And I'm like, you're missing the whole point of this analogy. It's not about my fingers pointing at you. I'm not tripling, back at you what you're doing. You're tripling back at you what you're doing. And, people who have anger issues don't realize that. Being angry at somebody is, as they say, is taking poison and hoping the other person suffers. Very often, the other person has no idea what you're really angry about and what the issue is. And they're going to make a wrong determination of what you're angry about unless you have meaningful discussion with them. And here's the real challenge that, and again, people who are often angry don't do this. They're not open to that information. They're not open to asking, is there an alternative understanding? Is there a different interpretation of the events? How do you see what's going on? Right, so that's one of the ways that you work with couples is change partners. And what do you see? Change roles, rather. right? Not change partners, but change roles within your
that's a different
your
show.
couple. Yeah, we're not going there. But change roles so that if it's a husband and wife or two husbands or two wives, whoever is in the dyad in the relationship, then take the other person's position. And what arguments are you going to put forth? And you realize that you're not arguing about what you thought you were. Usually the arguments they're not at each other, they're sideways to each other, and you're not really talking to each other. And so you're talking to the wind, but you're getting yourself angry, you're getting yourself depressed, you're getting yourself anxious. And yes, you're doing it to you. They're not doing it to you.
Mm-hmm.
You're choosing to respond. Now, with that, if your kid's about to run across the street, grab the belt, the shirt, whatever, and pull them back off the street. And if you lose your control of your temper, you don't lose your temper, you lose control of your temper. And you might paddle the kid in the moment, but if so, apologize, because you did it because you lost control. And that's a hard one. That's a hard one for parents.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at that kid running across the street. Now you've grabbed him, you've paddled him. Well, now what they've really learned, perhaps, no guarantees because you never know how kids are going to put things together. What they might have learned is I'm going to cross the street when you're not watching me, so you can't grab me and paddle me.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Right? I did not learn that crossing the street is bad. I learned that you grabbing me and paddling me is bad. Okay? Because everybody takes in different stimulus and learns different things. And when we decide that we know something, we have closed off new information. And new information is always available. That doesn't mean don't act. You have to do the best you can with what you've got. Everybody does their best most of the time, unless they're being lazy. In which case they're most likely to say they did their best. And, at one level they did. They did what they were able to do in the moment or chose to do in the moment. And so the question is not, did you do the best? You, of course, did the best. What can you now do and learn so that you're better tomorrow than what your best was today? Right? Do we want to continue to grow? And all of this fits into this time of year because it's Elul. This is the time for people to start to approach, Jewishly, to start to approach God. It is said that the letters of Elul stand for Ani Ladodi Vidodi Li. I am my beloved, i.e. God's, and God is mine. Right? So that we're entering this deep, intimate relationship with God, with whom we can have no secrets. We can have secrets from ourselves, but we can't have them from God. And so it's an attempt to cleanse and bare your soul. And I like to tell my congregation that there's good news and bad news with Yom Kippur coming. Yom Kippur is the 10th day of the month of Tishrei. Tishrei is the month that follows Elul. And the good news is that whatever you own and you're contrite and truly repentant and have done restitution, you'll be forgiven. The bad news is that you have to own it, do restitution, do all the work. That's the bad news. It don't come for free. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's a get-out-of-jail with work.
So it's very interesting. You're approaching the High Holy Days.
Yeah, the High Holy Day season, yeah.
And in a way, I guess the Christians in a way would have Advent.
Right.
Or Lent approaching their big.
Right. Right. Every religion's got an opportunity to do some soul work.
Yeah.
Right? The Christians, as you pointed out, have that. The Muslims have Ramadan.
Yes, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Everybody's got their holiday. Hindus have Diwali, right? The victory of the light over the dark, the good over the evil. Everybody's got that battle because we're all humans. All sacred story tells basically how do you live in community. That's what it's for. How do we support each other? I know I've mentioned it a few times, and I actually teach it in my world religion class. I don't have one of those this semester, but I teach the story of the loaves and the fish,
Mm-hmm.
right, where Jesus breaks bread with the multitude. And the question that I always ask my students is, which is more powerful, to feed somebody or to teach them how to feed themselves?
The latter.
You think? Okay, good. Because then the miracle would be to teach people how to survive, not to give them lunch. And this is a great thing to end the story on, maybe.
Ooh.
And if somebody reminds me next week, I'll go ahead and talk about it. But that is a story of sharing. And there's so many markers in the story to show that. Why is that important? Because only by sharing and connecting and forming groups will the Judeans of the day survive Rome.
Wow.
Okay, and that's the issue that's overarching. And of course, once it becomes the religion of the Holy Roman Empire, there's not this desire to teach people how to resist Rome.
Ooh. Holy smokes. You got
and
that.
And all of that as well.
Hit a home run there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, you have to look at some of these things in context and historically. And it really, all sacred story is about how do we live in relationship? How do we live in community? How do we get along together? How can we better survive the challenges of the day? How do we survive the political threats in our world? How do we survive the health threats in our world? How do we survive the economic threats in our world? Because those are all threats. And every generation has its set of threats. It's easy to look at what's going on now and pretend that it's never happened before. But we've had this conflation before. It's not the first pandemic that humans have ever faced. It's not even the most lethal pandemic that humans have faced. You don't have to look far into history to see lots and lots of very, very lethal pandemics. HIV is still killing so many people every year, and people have swept it under the rug and don't pay any attention.
Well, because a lot of that is not, if you want to say, the general
people don't feel threatened by it,
if you will. I'll leave it at that. But as long as it's associated with just, say, one segment of society, it's easier to sweep under the rug.
Except that it's not.
Oh, no, I'm well aware of that.
Yeah. It's not. And, many people who do not fit that demographic succumb to HIV.
Oh, yeah.
And, people are not aware of some of the issues.
But it was easier in the 80s to
claim that and stereotype it.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I wish that I didn't know people this year that died from it. But unfortunately I do. In many different places and ways. And, it's not the first flu-like pandemic that we've had. We've got so many others. So that doesn't make Corona not significant. Corona, of course, is significant. And I wish that we were more socially responsible. I wish that people did wear their masks. Americans are known throughout the world for not being courteous of others. I teach Chinese kids, right? And one of my Hong Kong students said to me, there's a lot of Americans in Hong Kong. Of course there are, because there's a lot of business that goes on in Hong Kong. And she said she can always pick out the Americans are the ones not wearing the masks.
The ugly Americans.
And I'm like, yeah. Yeah. Enough said, right? And they're even in a culture where it's expected that you're going to wear a mask if there's anything contagious going on, right? They tend to wear masks in Asia during flu season, Japan more than China, but China as well.
And they should, because of their smog problems.
Well, yeah, they've got there's lots of issues involved. And, I will say that again, talking to some of my students, there's a lot of discussion about putting in plants to help clean up the environment and doing cleanups and things like that. A lot of older cultures, unfortunately, and Americans do it too. It's just we do a little bit better job of cleaning it. I see plenty of it in my neighborhood where people just throw cans and bottles and bags and stuff out the window. Right? You would ask, why would somebody do that? That's harming animals that didn't ask to be harmed. It's harming the environment. It's going to come back in our water and in our land and our food supply. But people aren't thinking about those consequences. They're unintended consequences. They're closing their eyes. It's willful ignorance on those issues. And people have done that forever. I know I've mentioned it other shows as well. The biblical mention of Gehenna. Gehenna is not hell. It's a trash dump. It's on the outskirts of Jerusalem. And it's still there, and it's been there burning for millennia. It's where the people who live in Jerusalem toss out their garbage down the hill into a trash dump. And so if you don't want to end up there when you die, you want a proper burial. You want people to mourn you, to respect you, to miss you, because that's part of our need for being significant, and not a body that's just tossed out of the trash and burned.
Wow, I never knew it was a real...
it's a real place.
Real place.
It's a real place. You can look on a map of Jerusalem and find it.
Yeah, wow.
And, I can show it to you on Google Maps or whatever it is that's on my phone. So these are real places. And so getting back to it, what can we do? How can we be better with ourselves and each other? How can we be kinder to ourselves? How can we be less anxious? How can we be less depressed? How can we be less angry? How can we be more joyful? How can we pursue happiness better? How can we be energetic and healthy? How can we do the things that make our lives more meaningful, more valuable? Because the person who has to like you is the person looking at you in the mirror. And that's the hardest one of all. But that's where you've got to, and I'm not talking about, a narcissistic, oh, I'm gorgeous, look at me, let me put pictures of me all over the place so that everything I see is me. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the really being able to live with yourself and liking the person you are becoming. You are becoming. You have not finished unless you've drawn your last breath. Right? So we're all works in progress. We all can get better, but we have to choose to do that. We have to choose to use the tools that are there for us. So Christian sacred story, Jewish sacred story, all of them, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, they're all aimed at helping us be the best person we can be. So an invitation to join us for High Holy Days in 2 weeks.
Rabbis.
Yeah, please check us out on www.eitzchayim.org. And a quick message that third Friday this month is September 11th next week. So please join us for that as well. Curbside pickup of a Shabbat dinner. That's because third Friday is Rosh Hashanah. So register for that and join us for the holidays as well.
All right. Well, you have a good week.
Thank you. God willing, see you next week, same time.
You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL, Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast, webcaster to the world.